You mentioned some of these porn stars. You write about this in the book on how almost invariably, if you interview one of these women while they're in the midst of their stardom, they will defend the porn industry and talk about being liberated and how they are making a lot of money and they're there by choice and don't feel sorry for them. They're exploiting the industry's not exploiting them, and so on. And yet you actually take a deep dive into that and find that in case after case, some of the most famous adult film actresses we've seen have come out later with a very different message, which doesn't get covered anywhere near as much.
Yeah, absolutely. They basically always travel in that direction. So when you're in the industry, you defend the industry, you talk about how you're doing it for your own sexual liberation, etc. And then after you leave the industry, that's when the story changes. Because actually, I think sometimes you need that distance from what can be really, really traumatic experience in order to actually sit back and assess it and say, hang on, that actually caused me a lot of pain. A really good example of this is Jenna Jameson, who's extraordinarily famous, successful porn actress of the 1990s. And is now actually a campaigner against porn, and is in particular a campaigner against MindGeek, which is the big umbrella organization that owns the most popular porn platforms in the world. Jenna actually did participated in a debate in the Oxford Union 20 odd years ago in defense of porn, and spoke, very persuasively on how porn was actually a great thing, and she won her debate. And then I recently spoke at the Oxford Union on much the same issue and stood in exactly the same place that Jenna stood. And I opened by saying, this was the debate that was held 20 years ago. And I reckon Jenna Jameson would now be standing on the opposite side of this bench, because she has completely changed her tune about porn industry, as porn actresses almost always do if they live that long. Because as I was saying, the suicide rate, the substance abuse rate is absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm. What about, I worry about porn because I have 3 kids, right? And they say that the average 12-year-old boy has already been exposed to porn, at least. I think it's well over 50% have more than likely been exposed to pornography by 12. By 12, they don't know what this is. That's dark. And it's not, forgive me for drawing lines like this, but back in my day, in the 70s, maybe you saw some guy's Playboy, right? And you saw a picture of a naked woman, or you read something naughty in a penthouse. Not at all what these kids have available to them with just a phone. Just a phone. And ideally, you've got the parental, all that stuff, but they can get around it. They have some friend who doesn't have it, or there's some device in the house that doesn't, whatever. They're seeing it. And I know I've read, and we talked about how, one of the reasons it's so damaging is because these young boys who really get into it can start to think that that's what sex is. And when they have their first normal sexual relationship with a real live girl in their school or college, they think that this is what sex is, and it's some dirty, weird, bizarre thing instead of this beautiful, somewhat tenuous in the beginning, exploratory, beautiful, loving exchange. So, but I think it's more complex than that. There are other dangers to exposing yourself to porn, having your child get exposed to porn. Could you talk about it?
I'm going to do the back in my day thing too. And I'm only 30. I was born in 1992, but I was just a little bit too young to have smartphones specifically. So we didn't have smartphones until we were sort of 18. And I think that's the really, really big change, that Gen Z now have access to this stuff where, as you say, they're 12 younger. The statistics are horrifying for any parent, for anyone really who's concerned about the next generation. They're basically guinea pigs. We've got these vast multi-billion-dollar global corporations who are basically beaming the most sadistic content you can imagine into little computers that are in the pockets of children. And it frustrates me so much that anyone who talks about this, you're sort of treated as if you're being alarmist or prudish. I'm like, hang on, this isn't normal. This isn't, we've had however many millennia of people, having sex and working it out. It's not as if this is being anti-sex to say that we shouldn't have children watching hundreds or thousands of video of adults having sex before they've even kissed a member of the opposite sex. That's not normal. This is extremely novel. It's extremely experimental, what's going on right now. And I mean, I'm personally really frustrated by how little governments have done to regulate these huge businesses, and actually how people on the left who are supposed to have an opposition to big business and to be critical of capitalism, they're actually often the first to resist any kind of efforts to regulate this stuff and say, actually, children really shouldn't be seeing this. The really extreme stuff really shouldn't be there. The problem is, I think that the platforms make money by attracting viewers, and particularly they make money from the most compulsive users. I mean, that tends to be also true of, say, the gambling industry or alcohol, smoking, drugs, all these things which are addictive. They tend to sell most of their product to the minority of users who use it really compulsively. So it's about 2% of men you watch porn for more than 7 hours a week, which is an enormous amount of time, right? And anyone who's doing that is going to have almost certainly going to have erectile dysfunction, is going to have really, really dysfunctional relationships, is basically not going to be capable of having normal sex, having normal sex relationships at all. And those men are the main people who are driving the industry. And one of the harms done to them, I think that the harms done to porn stars is really extreme. But I actually think the consumers are harmed too. And I feel terrible for some of the men who get stuck in this addictive cycle. It's a miserable cycle. I've heard from these men, I've had emails from them and so on, saying how much they actually hate this product. They hate being so hooked on it. But the way that it's designed is such that it really kind of taps into the most primal bits of your brain. And it is almost like being addicted to gambling or to drugs or something like that. And that it leaves you wanting more, and even more so, it kind of, you have to get an even more extreme stimulus in order to get the next hit, because you get acclimatized to the more vanilla content, and then you seek out more extreme content. And this is when the platforms come in with their algorithms and they suggest the more extreme stuff. So they say, and what about this video? And what about this video? And one of the really disturbing things that we're hearing now from psychologists who are working with sex offenders is that while it used to be that the kind of the profile of the sex offender who had been caught watching child porn, in possession of child sexually abuse images, more accurately, were men who were sort of very deep-seated pedophiles. Like, they were only interested in children. They had the kind of classic profile of the pedophilic offender. Whereas now what they're seeing more and more is men, sometimes really quite young men, who actually don't have that kind of profile, have not necessarily been interested sexually in children. What's wrong with them is that they're addicted to porn, and they end up, initially they're watching normal porn, but probably from a very young age, and then very soon they get used to that, and they seek out more extreme content, and so they end up watching sadomasochistic content, really kind of taboo-breaking content. And, what's the most taboo-breaking content that is? It's child sexual abuse images. And so they end up in the very worst parts of the internet, because that's the kind of the pipeline that's being established. And it's a profitable pipeline. That's what's really disturbing about it.
Well, like a lot of people these days, I am trying to eat healthier. And that is one of the reasons why I love good olive oil. And by good, I mean fresh. Olive oil packs the most flavor and the healthiest nutrients when it's fresh from the farm. And that is the problem with supermarket olive oils. They're not fresh. They can sit on the shelf for many months growing stale. That's why I like my olive oil direct from small, award-winning farms, thanks to a guy named TJ Robinson, also known as the olive oil hunter. When I first tasted TJ's farm fresh oils, I fell in love with their vibrant flavors. They are delicious on salad, veggies, pasta, meat, fish, you name it. And as an introduction to his fresh pressed olive oil club, TJ's willing to send you a full-size $39 bottle of one of the world's finest artisanal olive oils for just $1 to help him cover shipping. Best of all, there's never a commitment to buy anything, and you can cancel your membership at any time. Get your free $39 bottle for just $1 shipping, and taste the difference freshness makes. It really does. Go to harvestfreshnow.com. That's harvestfreshnow.com for a free bottle and pay just $1 in shipping. harvestfreshnow.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.